myself first of all. So my name's Jade. I am one of the directors of Inspire Sports Group, and I have seen a few names that I recognise. But for those that don't know me, I have been in netball land for quite a while as a player, and over the last, probably 7-8 years have spent a lot of time coaching in various different levels, grassroots all the way up to state level and elite level netball. I'll hand it over to Guy to introduce himself maybe.
My name's Guy. I'm the Community Development Manager with Inspire. And again, I've kind of been involved within netball through coaching as well as playing as well for the Victorian and Australian men's team, and have coached all the way from grassroots level up through the state team programs in Victoria, as well as currently working with Hawks Netball for the Championship of 19 and under female team. So yeah, lots of coaching experience to draw on.
So for tonight's session, before we get into it, we just wanted to explain, I guess, how it came about and also just generally how it's going to work. So this session has come off the back of some online coaching workshops that we've done in the last month or two, and we thought it was a good time to be putting something like this out there to really just try and give all of you some confidence when you do hit the court, which is hopefully really soon, and just to give you some hints and tips, I guess, around this specific age group. Knowing that we've kind of allocated about 45 minutes or an hour for this session, we would love to be covering lots and lots and lots, but the session is aimed at giving you hints and tips, and we will cover different aspects, but we won't be delving too deeply into training session structure or skill development. It is around just, I guess, an overview of this age group and things that you can go away and start considering for yourself. So we are definitely happy for questions. It might be a good idea to put them in the chat, and if it's relevant to whatever we're talking about, or if we get time at the end, we'll definitely try and answer any questions that come up. So we might get started now and just give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to chat about tonight. So we've got a PowerPoint presentation that we've done. And we might go into the second page. Yep, so there's the first page.
I can't click to the next.
Oh yeah, there we are, cool. So overview of the session for tonight. First thing we're going to look at is just key considerations for under 13. So we're just going to look at a couple of factors and things that we really want you to consider for your group that you're working with. Then we're going to look at program planning, and as I said earlier, just have a really good look at it, or an overview of the skills for under 13 age players, and then just go into program planning and how to group those skills. Developing effective training sessions, so just some hints and tips around how to be engaging and how to deliver your training sessions for under 13s. Some match day coaching, and then finally we'll just give you some tips for engaging young athletes, particularly around this age group. So that's what tonight is all about. We are going to get straight into it in our key considerations. And Guy and I have had some really good chats in the last few days about under 13 netball. Like any age group, I think there's always things that stand out that you need to consider. And basically what you can see here is, I guess, what we thought were the priorities when we look at under 13 netball. So to start off with, strength and conditioning, which you can see there as the top point, it's definitely something that can be introduced at under 13s. And I know when we spoke about it, we were a bit like, oh, we don't feel like, I guess, some of the under 13 groups we've worked with necessarily we would put that into it, but then there were other groups that we definitely would be utilising some strength and conditioning or injury prevention activities. So we will talk about this a lot tonight, but we want you to go away really thinking about how you can best get to know your group that you're working with and the individual players. And that's probably a starting point when thinking about strength and conditioning. You know, if you are working with an under 13 rep team, I definitely think there should be some S&C and injury prevention in there, and it might be part of a whole program rather than just the under-13s. Even if you're at club level, I think there's definitely basic exercises you could be implementing. Even as part of a warm-up, you'll see there that one of the points below is having a home program. If you feel like it's something that you could introduce for your players and there's definitely a gap there, or they are lacking strength in particular areas, that's where you could give them a home program. And it doesn't need to be they've got to go to the gym 5 times a week. It can just be simple body weight exercises to be doing at home, only 10 minutes, you know, maybe twice or 3 times a week. So it doesn't have to be anything full on. I will talk about the knee program now, which we've got a link up for you. And I'm hopeful that a lot of you know about the knee program that's on the Netball Australia website. It is a great resource. We use it all the time. We use it in our programs, and definitely encourage you to jump on and have a really good look at what's covered. It does look at footwork, strength and conditioning, balance, core. It does cover lots of different aspects in terms of just general S&C and injury prevention. So we would encourage you to look at that and then go away and maybe think about what you can implement for your team.
Yeah, and I think that then leads us really well into the next point around particularly in this age group, we're probably as coaches going to be looking at having multiple players within our teams that are very different in their maturity and having gone through puberty a little bit earlier and some that haven't yet. So, and then coming up against opposition that maybe have also gone through those that puberty or that maturity a little bit quicker or earlier than others. So you often see those real tiny ones that haven't quite yet developed all their, you know, all the way through, and then ones that have developed really early. So there's often sometimes a bit of a mismatch in body types and strength and height, and that can be challenging. It can also sometimes affect the confidence and the mental side of the game for a lot of those younger players that are maybe a little bit smaller. So it's something that we kind of were thinking about in what's the key takeaway from that. And I think it's making sure that we prepare all of our players, and again, knowing them, that if they are a little bit, you know, showing signs of not being really confident out on court when they come up against the big, tall body, something that we often talk to the players that we work with in this age group is about them knowing what their strength is, so that when they do get a little bit maybe intimidated or a bit nervous out on court, is to know what their strength is. And I'm sure if they're a bit smaller, it's going to be their agility or their speed and ability to, you know, kind of move their bigger defender or bigger opposition. So just reminding them about what their key strengths are and being able to put that out on court rather than worrying about a big, tall opposition. And it might be that, you know, you have to teach them more around stepping around and passing around a big, tall hands over, or maybe it's about driving strongly away and then coming back to the ball more rather than always going into the back space. So it's just a consideration for us as coaches to be aware of, and then using strategies to be able to get the most out of our players and athletes when they do come up against something that's a bit different.
Netball age. Oh, yeah, question.
Sorry, no. It's just the slideshow isn't moving. It's stuck on. It's stuck on slide 1.
Oh, thank you for letting us know.
That's okay.
Go previous. Here, I might have to.
If you can let us know when it does come up. And if that does happen again, don't hesitate to send us a chat to say it's not working, so we don't go too far into it.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Oh, okay. Yep, so the next page. Yep. And we can see, oh no, we're back. Everyone can see the key considerations now?
Yep.
Awesome. Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. But again, thank you for letting us know. So we've gone through the S&C and injury prevention and looked at the difference in body types. Another thing that we felt was really prevalent with this age group was netball age versus actual age. So I think you might find with under 13s that you will have players, as it says there, that have been playing for quite a while, or from when they were first allowed to, you know, 7, 8 years of age, versus someone that is new to netball. So we felt like this was definitely a challenge in trying to, you know, bring out the best in everyone and develop sessions and strategies that would really work for everyone. And in terms of thinking about, you know, how are we going to be able to do that, again, we felt it was really about you as a coach getting to know your players. If someone's new to netball, have they played any other sport? You know, learning what skills they might be able to bring. And then also thinking about players that are in your team that have played for quite a while. What else could they be developing, even aside from their physical skills, maybe their leadership skills? So just when you are, and hopefully, you know, most of you have been coaching under 13s or are doing 13s this year and hopefully get a chance to get out there. Don't be afraid to ask lots of questions, try things that, you know, might work for some and not others, because a lot of it will be trial and error as well. But I think if you are aware of that, or we've had quite a few questions around, you know, if you've got some players that have come in that are new, how do you manage that? I think just trying to get to know them really quickly, but also ensuring that your leaders or your experienced players can still play a role, even though they might be working on basic activities that they've done before, they can definitely still work within those activities and really try and help those new players improve. So again, just something to be really aware of, and I'm sure all of you face that or have faced that potentially at this age group. So.
And I think another point, just to follow on from that, is just around our expectations of coaches is knowing that a lot of the players that we're working with in this age group aren't going to master a skill to be able to perform at 100% consistently all the time, even at that top age, 13, that's maybe played for a long time. They're still not at a mastery stage. So it's okay to move on and progress the skill just a little bit, to challenge those more advanced athletes with your group, while then still concentrating on the basic foundation skills with those newer athletes to the sport. So yeah, don't stress so much that not everybody being able to perform at the same level if you need to move on. The final point that we thought worth talking about around key considerations was just that whole thing around winning versus participation, and looking at a couple of points within that around rotations and whether you're still working through all players having a go at, you know, lots of different positions, particularly because you've probably had quite a few under 11s that maybe have come up to under 13s, and that's what they're used to, is still playing all the different positions week in, week out. But then also maybe some of them aren't too sure of what their, you know, kind of natural position might be, and they're still kind of figuring that out a little bit. So it's just probably something for you, again, to be aware of, and maybe developing your own coaching philosophy. And it might be something that's actually dictated to you a little bit by either the association that you're in or the club and team that you're in around those rotations. Something that we always kind of look at is try not to pigeonhole players too early into a position, because you just never know, you know, what they might be able to produce in any given moment. And if we look at the long-term development of a player, you know, if you've got somebody that has matured really early and we're just sitting them in the end, so goalkeeper, goal shooter, are we doing them a disservice for their later development and being able to become a well-rounded player? You know, particularly having worked in a lot of kind of selection processes, if they can't play more than one position, it's really hard for them to be identified within either a rep program at an association level, or even as they get older into a, you know, into a zone academy program or into a state team. We're really wanting them to play multiple positions. So yeah, try not to pigeonhole them too early into a particular position. And again, looking at then that fairness of court time, and is it everybody gets fed, you know, court time, regardless of whether they're the the best player out in the team, or the one that maybe struggles a little bit for consistency. So again, this might be dictated to you by your club. I would say, as long as you're really open and honest and communicate what your philosophy around that is very early within the season, within the program, I think, and you are then consistent with it. So if you have a rule that if you aren't at training, then you don't begin the game, then you're consistent with that. I think then that pays a lot of down the track, where if you're a bit wishy-washy with it, like one person might be allowed to, but one person might not be, then that's when, issues can come up from parents or that sort of stuff. So just being really consistent with what your rotation and fairness of court time is.
And just on top of that, I know Guy just mentioned it, but I would definitely ensure you're communicating not just with the players, but with the parents around that as well. And it might be that you just have a meeting with everyone before the season starts to say, this is how we're going to work through this year, and just outline everything in terms of what Guy just mentioned, just to make sure the parents are on the same page as well as the players. So, yeah.
All right, so we'll move to the next slide. Just a quick thumbs up if you can see the program planning, make sure. Thank goodness. Okay, so just a really quick introduction into our program planning. And I've got up there the Netball Australia Netball Skill Development Framework. So this framework will outline all the skills that are involved within the game of netball, and kind of their guideline around when we should be implementing those skills within their age group. So I'm just going to stop sharing the slideshow just for a moment, and I forgot to get out of the screen.
Yep, so click up here, the X.
Can you just touch it? All right, so...
And you're going to go back into full screen. Yeah.
And I'm just going to share the framework with you now. So you can see the framework just gives you a bit of a basic guide to why it was developed and what's involved within that. But as you scroll down, you'll see on the left-hand side all the types of skills. So the movement skills, the ball skills, attacking, defence, shooting and strategies, and then also our strategies or kind of systems or set play within that. This is where it's really tricky for this age group, for 13 and under, because you are probably going to be mixing the foundation, which would be 11 and under skills, your own age group skill, which is the development skills, so 11 to 13 years of age, and maybe even for some of your advanced athletes that have been playing for a number of years, you might also need to maybe consider some of your next age groups to prepare them as they go up through the age group. So it's probably a really difficult age group to be coaching, to try to work through all of these skills, and you can see that there is quite a lot. So it's a really great resource to be able to have a look at and go, okay, what are some of the skills that I should be concentrating within this age group? We did have a question come through when the registrations came through around, is it okay to look at systems and set plays within this age group? And if you have a look down at the strategies section here, they've got some centre pass options, which are looking at like a narrow, which would be kind of a bit like a split and re-offer, a wide or a back door, or going back to the goal defence, wing defence strategy, centre pass defence, one-on-one, and then also some baseline or throw-ins here from a defensive throw-in. So yes, it is okay to start to develop some systems and set plays. what me and Jade often talk to about with coaches when we go out and do some mentoring or work with them is around thinking about the set plays as starting positions, and knowing that, okay, this is how we're meant to be set up, but if the ball doesn't go there, then what's the next option? Or if that player is covered, then we need to have a plan B, or a what if moment. So I think they're great to have as a bit of a starting guide, or you know, just as to get the players mentally switched on to what we would love to happen. But the amount of times that you see the ball travel in the perfect system would maybe do 1 or 2 times in a game. So yeah, just knowing that you have to have a what if situation there as well. So great resource. I really implore you to log in and have a look at that. But what does that information mean? So how do we actually transition that into our program? So I'm just going to share quickly a little document that I've developed, and it's a bit of a program planning template. Can everybody see that Excel spreadsheet? Yep, great. So this is, before lots of questions coming in saying, can you share this? This is a broader project that we are currently working on, which will become available hopefully within this year, around this manual and being able to provide some skills as we work our way through. So in this Excel spreadsheet, I've just kind of structured all the skills, again, down the left-hand side, and just transitioned all the 13 and under individual skills down the side as well. And I've actually broken it up a little bit into area specific. So some goaling, centre court, because the framework didn't necessarily cover the centre court, and some defence, circle defence, as well as our basic strategies here. Also have kind of structured our season into 10 weeks, because probably most of you would be dealing with like your season, or your part of your season would be on a term basis, to break for a couple of weeks over holidays. So looking at focusing on attack for 2 weeks, then the 3rd week looking at defence. In the 4th week, we're looking at area specific and strategy. So you might be looking at breaking up into your areas and then coming back together to do the whole strategy at the end. And then following that same process, how I'm going to get across, I can't get across, but then it kind of follows the same process again. So 2 weeks for attack, defence, and then area specific. The last 2 weeks is kind of a little bit of game sense activities, and where an opportunity to try to put as many of those skills into play against attack defence. So you might just spend, you know, a large portion of your time doing some match play or game sense activities where they're trying to implement attacking skills versus the defending skills that you've kind of concentrated on. We also spoke a little bit in the intro about how do we group these skills together, and you can kind of see that if we look at the ball skills, they've in the guidelines are looking at the application of a lob and overhead pass, but they've have kind of assumed that they've already been able to do chest passes and shoulder passes, but as coaches we know that they are probably the passes that we still need to really concentrate on being able to implement those. So I still put those in there. And the application of lob, I've started to look at within the strategy area specific week, because it will go hand in hand with the goalers working on their hold. So you might work on your mid quarters, creating an angle onto the circle edge to receive a pass, and then doing a lob pass into their goalers on a hold. So that's how you would kind of group your skills together a little bit. And if you look at, not quite, oh, they still will be able to see. Can you guys see the column that I'm highlighting now?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I've also popped the lob into this one as the attacking skill is the lead and drop back. So probably a lot of the times when we're getting the players to perform a lead and drop back, we would need them to do execute a lob pass to get that ball up and over a defender. So again, that's kind of how you would tend to group the skills together as much as you can. So gives you a bit of an idea into that. Are there any questions around the program planning or that kind of core skill development? No?
Nope, I'm good.
Thanks.
All right, so we'll just bring up our
PowerPoint.
You might need to just, yeah.
Sorry.
Go back into Zoom now.
Technology, you've got to love it. All right, share.
Yep, left.
Left.
There we go.
And slideshow.
So what we're going to move into now is developing an effective training session. So this is quite a detailed and can be complex task, I guess, as a coach. So as we mentioned earlier, we'd love to go deeper, but we just wanted to give you, I guess, those hints and tips around what an effective training session does look like and how you can think about it for yourself and really try and come up with a great training. So you'll see there up the top that it says the number one thing that we need to think about before going into our training sessions are what do we want to achieve and how are we going to achieve this? Can't see it?
No, can't see it.
Oh, okay.
We're just having some
PowerPoint issues. We're actually having some computer spaz out issue. Okay, let's just stop this. I'm just going to see what's going on there. All right, so let's take 2. Yeah, I don't know why that's staying up there. Let's just close that. Is there a chat? Let's just read this chat to see. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay, take 2. We're going to go. And we're going to go from.
You see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. It's all right. We would be fine without that. Okay. So training sessions, basically, as I said a few minutes ago, just the first thing you do have to think about is what is the focus of the session? What do I want to achieve? How am I going to achieve this? And that can involve lots of different things coming into your head, but that's the ultimate thing that we want you to be considering when you're going into a training or about to plan one. So the first thing you'll see there is skill development. So just as an example, your session focus might be, I really want us to improve on our one-on-one defence. You know, I want us to get better at pressuring the other team and really try and delay their movement down the court. Now, that's great and, you know, definitely a strategy we love to do, but in terms of the skills involved with that, there's actually quite a bit in it. So we have to break it down at the beginning and go, well, how am I going to achieve my goal? It's actually going to take a few different skills for us to get there. The next point there, integrating new players to the team and players coming up from under 11. So as we mentioned earlier, you will need to consider players that may know quite a bit in terms of skills and have been taught a lot to do with defence, if we're working off that example, but then you might have a player that really hasn't played netball before. So factoring in that, how am I going to ensure both players still get something out of this session is definitely an important aspect. Engagement, which a lot of you did write in and ask questions around, so engaging your players. So how do we engage, and we'll go through that a little bit later on, but that's definitely something to think about when planning your session. So the focus might be on ensuring that we improve our one-on-one defence, but how am I going to engage the players and ensure that they're actually, you know, implementing the skills and improving, but enjoying it, really switched on and buying into what you're trying to achieve. So that's probably the biggest challenge of all. And we've said there, game sense activities are really, really great because I think everyone that plays netball generally is a bit competitive and, you know, likes to put their best out there against their teammates. So coming up with those activities is a really great way to engage your players, and then also letting the players just play the game, whether it is just some match play or you've come up with an activity, and don't be too quick to jump in and maybe coach it sometimes. Just see what the players, I think at this age group, you know, some of them are pretty smart and they might be able to work things out for themselves, or even just come together if they're working in small groups and have a chat about, you know, what can we do now to see if we can hold up this group of players and not let them get to the goal circle or whatever it might be. Last thing to mention there is session structure. So with your timings, we chatted about how long under 13s train for, and it could be 45 minutes or an hour, or it could be longer than that, especially if it's football, netball or rep. So considering the time that you've got, how you're going to plan your session based on 90 minutes or 45 minutes, but then also thinking about what you want to achieve and how is that going to look like in the time that you've got to work with. You know, and 45 minutes isn't very long, so you're going to have to really nail the timings of that structure to achieve what you want to achieve. Next point, when we get back out there, this will probably be a really important point, but thinking about what happened in the last game, you know, that's something we always think about with the teams we coach, and there's generally something always to pull out of it, even if your team's won by a lot. There's always something to improve and develop on, and of course, if it's a closer game or you might have lost, definitely consider that when planning. And we've already mentioned it a few times, but just knowing your playing group, you know, thinking about how they receive information the best, what kind of coaching style they respond to, that type of thing. As soon as you get to learn what your players, I guess, respond well to, you'll probably find you have amazing training sessions. So is there any questions? I know I've gone through that a little bit quickly, but we want to make sure we get through everything tonight. So any questions around trainings? Okay, cool. Okay.
All right, so we'll move on to the next screen, and hopefully you can all see the match day coaching screen. Just to thumbs up.
Okay.
No.
So we're going to have to, I feel like every time we need to screen, we're going to have to stop share. And then
Maybe can you just stay on that?
Yeah, like the power. We don't need the slideshow.
well, let's just see if they can actually see that. Can you guys see this screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And apologies because we've never had this happen before, so I'm not sure. Anyway,
Cool.
let's keep going. Well,
So we thought what we might do is just to quickly, or not quickly, but just to give you a little bit of information around our match day and just some things to consider within that. So I think it's really important that we're really clear and open around communicating about the pre-game routine. And I know it's really frustrating sometimes as coaches, you have players rock up 5 minutes before a game and not really communicating. You're sitting there stressing, going, oh, are they coming? Are they not coming? Did I miss a text or did I miss an email or something like that? So just making sure you're really clear around what the expectations are of the parents and their players in the pre-game warm-up. You might see down there at the bottom, I've kind of allowed 20 minutes prior to a game for them to start their actual preparation for that. We don't necessarily want them over-prepared for it. I think that 20 minutes is a good time frame for that, for you to be able to deliver a really specific pre-game address or focus. And then allow some time to do a quick warm-up within a limited space, because I'm sure a lot of you are still working within a limited space to do those warm-ups. And then what does a pre-game address or pre-game focus look like? And you can kind of see the left-hand side on the netball court that we've got there is really we probably don't want to overload the players at this age, and really around 2 to 3 attacking focuses and 2 to 3 defensive focuses probably enough for them to really absorb and be able to go out and try to execute. So you might, work in different ways to be able to communicate that. Sometimes if we think about the players that we work with, just talking to them about those key points, I feel like it might go in one ear and out the other. So a strategy that we often use is having it written up onto a whiteboard. So think about that court as a whiteboard and just jotting down those couple of points. And then you could elaborate on them a little bit more. So in terms of attack focus, number 1, change the direction strongly to commit your opponent. You might then talk about, so remember from our training session, we really wanted you to drive strongly away from the ball to then turn and come back to the person with the ball. So just have that key note so they know change direction strongly, and then you can elaborate that a little bit more. It might be, good decision-making skills. Okay, so we want you to make sure that you're opening up your shoulders to see the whole court, and we want you to pick the best option, the first option that you see. And if you don't feel like that's the best option, then maybe we reset it and go again. So just elaborate on that point so that they've got a little bit more information on it. I've also put down a little note around in the pre-game focus around talking that you would also then need to give them what the team to begin lineup is. And I really love that phrase, and I use this a lot even with the older athletes that I coach, is that it's a team to begin, not necessarily a starting 7, because mentally a lot of players kind of get hung up on, oh, I'm not in the starting 7 this week. And particularly if you're doing more of a rotation policy, that's probably a given. It's going to probably look very different all the time. But often the team that starts the game isn't always the team that finishes. So I just love using that phrase around the team to begin is going to be big. So that mental side of starting 7 isn't there. And look, this is again knowing your group. Some really love lots of pre-game analysis of maybe the opposition. If you know a bit about the opposition that you're going to come up against, maybe they have a couple of dominant players that you've got to be aware of, or some strategies that they put out there. Talking about the previous training session, which was that example around the change of direction that I kind of talked about. And you might even just give a couple of quick little individual focuses in there as well. It might even be with somebody that gets very stressed if they make a few errors in a row, is you might just say, okay, so remember if we happen to turn the ball over in our attack, don't worry about it. Let's make sure that we fight really hard to get back into our defence as quickly as we can. And we want you to try to intercept that ball back straight away. So that might just be a quick little individual thing for them. Or it might be, we want you to really concentrate on, if they were a wing attack, to get to the ball to circle edge before feeding, particularly if they're known for big long passes from the centre third. So just giving them that little individual focus. So we might move on to the next screen, and we'll scroll down.
I can't see the mouse.
7.
Yep. Yep. So hopefully you can see the lovely Jade in bench position there, talking to her athletes. Just around communicating during the breaks, we know often in this age group that you don't have a lot of time during the breaks to communicate things that are going well and things that we need to fix. So we need to be able to communicate those things really quickly and clearly, and making any changes that you need to do as well. And again, that probably refers back to your fairness of court time. I'm not a big coach for making multiple changes at every single break, if you can try to get away with it. It just means that, that team that has to go out has to almost find their rhythm straight away again. So just thinking about those rotations and, trying to limit and making as many as you can. And a good little tip that we've kind of put in there is just the use of a whiteboard. So you've got your pre-game up on the whiteboard. What you might do is just, you know, if they're doing that particular focus really well, is either give it a big tick or just draw a big smiley face next to it so they know that they're doing a really great job with that particular focus. And maybe if they're not doing it so well, you might do a little bit of a cross so they know they have to lift their work rate or lift their intensity in that skill or that focus. And again, if maybe it might be a sad face, it's up to you to kind of have a look at that. The other thing that we thought we might just touch on was just around the post-game address. And I know some of you probably have players that have to quickly run off to their siblings' sport, or their mums or dads have to quickly take them away. But if you can try to get them to stay for, you know, 5 minutes, it doesn't have to be a super long discussion, but it's a really great thing to be able to do a really quick debrief of the game so that people come away knowing what they did well. And I think it's a great thing to use our sandwich technique. So using the positive, what did the team do well? We really want to start with that as our basis. What are some of the things that maybe we needed to keep working on to improve or just add consistency to, particularly if you have had a big win, we still want to be able to execute those consistently, and then how to improve that development area. So we do have a little video of a little activity that myself and Jade just worked through today. Just to give you a bit of an example of what that process might look like. And it's based off a little activity where you might just draw a straight line and you have to get some feedback. But we've made it a little bit more netball specific for us today. So, and it's all about providing feedback. So we're just going to bring up a little video. Can everybody see the video that's there? Yes?
And it just needs to go back to the start.
So what we'll do is we'll play the first part of it. We'll play the whole lot and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it as we go through.
I think it might be better. Okay, pretty good. Well done. I think that was a really good effort. I think we can do a little bit better. So let's maybe try again and see how we go. So I might just pause it and go back to the start and we'll just actually explain what we're doing. So you can see on that whiteboard, this is like a mid-quarter trying to drive to circle edge, and we're just using a marker to do that. And I've got my eyes closed. So I'm starting on that first cone, and my aim is to try to drive to the cone and then drive to circle edge. And Jade's going to give me feedback on how I've done that with my eyes closed so that I can try to get it better. Okay, pretty good. Well done. I think that was a really good effort. I think we can do a little bit better. So let's maybe try again and see how we go. Okay, so I love the speed of those two moves. I really want us to get to that cone. So if you can go an extra 2-3 centimetres, I think that will hit the cone, which will then allow you to create a nice angle into the circle. So let's give it a go. Keep those eyes closed. Excellent, well done. You can see by going closer to the cone, you get that 45-degree angle onto the circle. Well done. Yeah, so I'm hoping that you were able to pick up on some key cues that I was using. The first part was very general. I was, great job, well done. It could have been a little bit better, but, you know, let's just try it again. And I think Guy probably did improve on the second one, but possibly not really due to my feedback. More so he probably could see what he'd done. So, yes. Yeah. I don't think my feedback was overly good in that first one. But in the second one, if we go back to the sandwich effect, you know, I started with a positive. The first two moves, really quick, love the speed. I think if we can get out to that cone, and I was really specific in around that 2 to 3 centimetres. So it might be for you as a coach, if you're wanting a player to run out wide, you know, take 2 or 3 more steps to just get yourself right out so that then once you've got that change of direction, you've got a really nice angle onto the circle. So obviously we're giving not only a bit of positive at the start, the speed was great, and then what wasn't quite right, but also how to fix it, go further, but then why you're fixing it, because we want to try and make sure that angle is like that 45 degrees, it's really sharp, hitting the circle edge. So the more you can practice that type of feedback, for us, it's probably a bit of a habit now, which is great. We don't have to necessarily think about, oh, sandwich effect. But it will, you'll definitely find, I think, that your players will respond really well to you. And at the end of the day, no matter what age you work with, everyone does need positive feedback. And I know I can get stuck on the constructives quite a lot, but by using this, you'll find the player still feels quite good, because you have started with that positive and then really reinforced why it's so good to fix that constructive part. So hopefully that example made sense. We only took about six takes, I reckon, to get everything correct. But we will go into our last, we're nearly finished. We've just got one last thing we wanted to touch on before we finish up.
Yeah, last slide.
Yep, last slide.
I'm gonna find the mouse.
Oh, it'll be the second last one.
Yep, so thumbs up. Can we see that?
Key
Yep.
tips. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So key tips for engaging young athletes, which, as we said, a lot of you are really interested in. So let's have a look at these points. First one is be creative. I know sometimes we often go out and work with coaches and teams, and they tend to do the same warm-ups or work on a shoulder pass and do the same kind of activities week in and week out. And so we encourage you, and this is something that I myself personally try and work on every time I go out and run training sessions. I never run the same training session ever for the same group. So they might be working on the same skills, but I always try and change some of the activities or make it in a different area or add more players to it. So be creative. Don't be afraid to be creative. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Learn from it. We have all the time, or we run something and I'm like, oh, that didn't really work, did it? But yes, the more creative you can be, the more engaged your players will be. Second point, recognise achievements. So when a player has done something really well, or even if you've been working on a particular skill for a few weeks, make sure they know if they've done it and they've done it really well. And it could even be also that maybe a player in your team has achieved something great at school or in another sport. It's really nice to recognise those things as well. And it just makes them feel great. So that's a great way to engage your players too. Point 3, develop an inclusive environment that maximises participation. So just always try and, as it says there, create opportunities where your players can work with different players, not their bestie every second time. And you could just create challenges along the lines of, okay, I want you to find the person that's got the closest birth date to you, and you're going to go stand with that person and this is who you're working with for this particular activity. So the more you can do that, the more they get to learn about each other, and hopefully the more they start to combine really well on court as well. Last point, we've said it a few times, it's probably the number one thing we find for this age group is get to know your athletes. If they're new to netball, if they're not new to netball, find out what makes them tick. What are their gaps? What do they need to improve on? And even just get to learn, you know, what they are as a person. They'll probably be starting to bring their own personality out at this age. So, you know, really try and work in with that as much as you possibly can. Any questions around that? No? Okay. We will go into our last slide, which is kind of just to finish off, because quite a few of the questions that came through when we were looking at the registrations were around specific skills and strategies, and tonight was really about hints and tips for this age group. But these are the workshops that we deliver and cannot wait to get out and deliver again. Please, everyone book one because we're really missing doing them. But look, if there is something even that's come out of tonight where you think, I was looking at that skills framework and realised I don't know much about lob passes or goaling positioning, these are what we can help you with. And there's obviously quite a few there, but don't be afraid to reach out and have a chat to us. about that, and hopefully we can help support you and anyone else at your club that wants to keep improving their skills. So, okay, we're nearly pretty much at the end, but we probably do have a couple of minutes. If there is any questions on anything related to what we've talked about or anything different from anyone.
Something that we haven't covered that you were kind of, oh, I just really wanted some good tips around that. So the floor is yours.
Can I ask through here rather than the chat?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So with a training session, how long would you spend doing a warm up? So I have an hour and a half training session, so I'm lucky. So how long, you know, would you consider a good warm up for them would be?
Yeah, look, for yourself with a 90-minute session, I think this is a really great opportunity to do a more of an extended warm-up that might lead into some of those knee program strength and conditioning activities. So that's where you might focus. The first part of your session is around the strength and conditioning introduction skills after you do a warm-up. Or vice versa, you might do the warm-up, work through your session, and then look at to finish off with through the recovery or cool down phases when you might work on some of those other you know, strength and conditioning activities as well. It's a really great opportunity if you've got 90 minutes to really concentrate on some of those things. If you've only got an hour, I really think it's important to try to think of ways to warm up that might focus on the skill that you are focusing on. So if your focus is really on, you know, a defensive movement or, you know, defensive delaying of your opponent, then maybe you might have to incorporate some of those movements into your warm-up so that, you know, they're starting to already switch on to the session focus. But you know, time-wise, you probably don't want to go over 10 minutes, even if it's a 90-minute session or a 1 hour session. Keep it really short, sharp for the warm-up, then maybe do a bit of a game sense activity just to get them, you know, into it, enjoying it, smile, work together in a little activity, and then get into the skill development section.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Can I just ask a quick question as well?
Yeah.
Under 13 girls sometimes a little bit silly, you know, sometimes like to muck around a little bit. What's your advice in terms of, obviously you need to have a respectful relationship in order for the girls to listen, but what's your advice around discipline? You know, I pull out the push-ups, run laps, you know, that sort of stuff. Any advice there?
Good one. Yeah, look, it is hard because you don't really want to spend every training having to discipline your players. I think what's helpful is if right at the beginning of your season or when you start training is that you actually sit down with the group, and if you already know that, you know, this is a potential to happen, you might actually outline, I guess, some of the standards that you want to try and create for that group. And you could be really specific and say, you know, we want to make sure that at every session, as soon as we get here, you know, we're ready to go. We're going to work with someone different every week. You know, you could really guide how those standards are set. And do you mind me asking, are you club level or rep or what level?
Club level. So there's you know, varying degrees of commitment from.
Okay, and that's hard too. Yes. But again, like we said earlier, I think being as open as possible about that, and you know, you could say to the group, we realise there are players here that can't come to every training, or they get here right on the dot, or they get to the game 2 minutes before. And I would even say, again, I know they're young, but I still think they're capable of having a bit of ownership around this and saying, how are we going to manage this? What do you guys think? Should we make the start time or the warm-up time for a game 5 minutes before, knowing that not everyone can get there early? I would actually still get their input on that. And if you wanted to, their parents as well, knowing they are a little bit younger, because unfortunately, I think if you maybe the rules or the guidelines, it's probably not going to work in your favour, just with those players that just can't make certain things. So
it's more around how, like, if they're misbehaving.
You can jump.
It's all right.
Okay, we've got Greg in the sideline. He's
if they're misbehaving
adding a point.
Oh, sorry.
Guys manage.
A good way of kind of outlining it at the beginning is, what are your top golden rules for your training session? And that's where they might actually help to develop it, so they are all on the same page. Come up with what the 3 top golden rules are for a training, and it might be around if they're starting to misbehave or get distracted or distract others, is when you then come up with what the consequence for that is. So are they performing above the line or below the line? I know this is very big picture concept, but something you can still bring into an under 13 group at an introduction level, and just talk about, okay, if we are below the line, what are our consequences? Maybe it is that we don't finish off with match play in today's session. Or maybe it's that, we don't have our recovery snakes at the end of the game or something like that. But having what those key rules are, or golden rules, and then what are the consequences for not participating consistently with that. So that's kind of what I would kind of implement as much as possible.
And I would ask the players what they think should be the consequences. Let them see. And if it's not what you think, that's okay. You can kind of overrule that, but you never know. You might actually get some really great ideas around what they think should happen if someone doesn't toe the line, I guess.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
We just have one. How many training sessions would you recommend a week for an under 13 group? So it probably again depends on the level. I imagine if it's like a rep team, we're talking about 1 is ideal, because they would have their club training as well. And we did talk about this earlier, and that lots of players in this age group play other sports still, and they play school sports, so their load's pretty full on. So I would probably stick to the 1 a week. If you live regionally, twice a week is probably fine then, depending again on their loads. But like we said, if you can get a good understanding of what your team's loads look like, and if you think the opportunity for that second week would be really beneficial, for that second session could be really beneficial, then yeah, definitely you could do that. But I would probably tend to go with 1.
Yeah, and look, I think it's a good opportunity now through what we've all experienced with this COVID-19, and we're all now on this Zoom, is you might be able to use a Zoom for an online home training session as like a bit of a one-on-one session to develop some individual skills. It might be around their landing technique or, that sort of stuff. So you could implement something like that as just a bit of a specialist follow-up, or you might even just do like a quick fun, introduction to strength and conditioning via Zoom. I know from a VNL point of view at the moment, we're training via Zoom twice a week, and one of the sessions is strength and conditioning, and one of them is more netball specific. So I think it's easy to be able to carry through now into our normal training environment. So, you might not do that on a weekly basis. It might be once a fortnight or once a month. We're going to do a Zoom catch up and do a little strength and conditioning knee program activity.
So we just had a question just about the general presentation, and everyone will be sent the recording from tonight, so you will get all the information that we've discussed and covered. So hopefully that answers that one. Was there any other questions before we sign off? No? Okay, great. If anything comes up, obviously happy for you to ring, email, message, and yeah, we're happy to have a chat. But thank you so much for joining us. We do hope you got some hints and tips and pardon the pun, but you were inspired. And look, hopefully we get to see you out on the netball courts very soon. Hang in there, not too much longer, hopefully, to wait. But wish you all the best for your seasons, in whatever they may look like. And yeah, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.